All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk about fall leaf color. We're going to talk about why a lot of our deciduous trees, why their leaves change color in the fall. And so one thing I want to kind of talk about first is when do we usually anticipate fall foliage? Because this is something that attracts a lot of people. It's very big with tourism, especially whenever you go up into the Northeast New England area, it becomes very popular. And so every year, different places will release different fall foliage prediction maps based on our kind of weather conditions for that year. This one is from the Smoky Mountains Fall Prediction Map. And I tried to place this map kind of, when I was scheduling this class initially, I tried to base it on the fall prediction map. Of course, as we'll find out, it doesn't always go according to plan. Um, but if you see here, this is for October 20th. And let me get out my clicker. If you go here to Kentucky, kind of right about there, we should be this time of the year at near peak. So we should be seeing some color change at this point. I know. We're going to talk about that next. What are we really seeing though? Okay. This is our current map of what we're actually seeing. So again, we're here in West Kentucky. It's low. We're not seeing a lot of color. And there's a number of factors of this that we're going to talk about. Of course, our biggest one is going to be the drought has caused delay with our peak color. And so currently we don't have very much. Now, I will say about a month and a half ago, when we were kind of going into this drought, we did have some trees kind of prematurely produce some color. But then after that, it just kind of stopped from there. And so we're still seeing a lot of green. So certainly we're going to talk about all these factors that are contributing to our fall color. But yes, we are delayed right now. We really here in West Kentucky should be seeing fall color by mid-October. And now it's going to be pushed off till November at this point. So let's talk about what the two main factors are that cause leaves to change color. The first one is going to be shortening day length. As our days become shorter, that definitely impacts the trees, and we'll kind of talk about how the trees will produce a hormone that will result in leaf senescence. And what senescence is ultimately going to be like a leaf death. But we'll get into that in just a second. The other factor that contributes to leaves changing color are cooler temperatures. So not only are our days getting shorter, but our temperatures are cooling down. This is also a factor that we'll talk about too, because as you all have noticed, we've had pretty warm temperatures this fall, in addition to our drought. And so we just now finally, this past weekend with kind of the changeover, have gotten into a cooler weather pattern. So hopefully that'll start to create an impact. So what happens to trees once we start to have these two factors? So as I said, they release these hormones. And what these hormones do is they break down complex molecules into sugars and amino acids. And what those sugars and amino acids are for is that's your food source for the tree. Okay. And so these hormones are kind of signaling, hey, it's getting colder, the days are getting shorter, we're going to be entering dormancy here soon. We're not going to be actively growing. And so what do we need to do? We need to store up all our food for the winter, kind of like bears, kind of like what we think of with animals, kind of hibernating or storing their food for the winter. So plants have this indicator that helps them to break down these molecules into the proper food that they can store for next year and use for growth. As this is happening, we have our green pigment, chlorophyll, many of you are familiar with. That is going to start rapidly breaking down as a result. And as it breaks down, it will actually leave other pigments that are found in these leaves completely visible to our eyes. Ones that would not typically be visible while chlorophyll is present. And so we're going to talk about some of these different pigments. I love this picture because it's a really good demonstration, which we'll talk about how, of course, certain trees may have leaves that are more red or more orange, but sometimes you do have ones that kind of will change color over time as they mature, if you will. So kind of to reiterate, so trees need to get as much nutrients together as possible before these leaves are discarded during the fall months. And so that nutrients is taken from the leaves and then moved to the rest of the plant. It's moved to the stems and roots where it is stored for next year. Now, when the leaves are starting to change color as that chlorophyll is breaking down and revealing those pigments, what's going to happen is there's going to be a layer of cells that attach to kind of the stem, or what we call petiole part of the leaf. And what that is, it's called an abscission layer. And that's a barrier that forms in between. And what it's going to do is eventually it's going to help sever the leaf from the tree. Okay, so that abscission layer is very important to break off that leaf from the tree. So if you kind of never really thought about it, there's a lot of things involved, especially kind of more on a cellular level. And so, like I said, that layer is going to cut the tissue supporting the leaf, where it's going to eventually fall. And then all that's going to be left is kind of a little nub with a scar where it was growing on the branch. So what are the different types of pigments that we see that aren't chlorophyll pigments? So as our chlorophyll starts to break down, what are some other ones we see? Let's start off with the carotenoids. These are pigments that are going to be giving our orange and yellow colors on our leaves. I'm sure a lot of you all are familiar with the term beta carotene, right? We think about beta carotene in carrots, and it helps to form that orangish coloration. It's the same with the leaves in our trees too. There's also another type of carotenoid called a xanthophyll, and that one gives kind of this more bright yellow color. And so, as I mentioned, as chlorophyll is breaking down, you start to see these other colors. You start to see these yellows and the orange of these different carotenoids. And here in a minute, we'll talk about some of the different trees that have more of these orange and yellow colors too. What's another one? Tannins. And we kind of think of tannins, right? Like in the leather industry. So tannins is present in our leaves. It's usually only present after that chlorophyll fades, and it gives more of that brown copperish color. What it also does is when these tannins are stored in the leaves, a lot of times those tannins kind of make that leaf really bitter to the taste. And it's important to note that because it's a defense mechanism used by trees to save them from wildlife and other things that might be eating on them. And that's one thing we're going to kind of go a little more in depth later, is a lot of our oaks and our beech trees will hold on to kind of brown leaves as a source of a defense mechanism against wildlife, mainly wildlife eating the leaves and twigs and other parts of the plant. Now, the pigment that causes the brilliant red colors, those scarlets and those kind of purpley colors, that's called anthocyanin. And so not all trees produce this pigment like the other pigments do. This is based off how much sugar accumulates in the leaves. So kind of like a little bit of like a chemical reaction, if you will. The more you have sun exposure, right, the more a tree has direct sunlight, the more it's going to photosynthesize, right? The more photosynthesis is going to create more sugar production, okay? More sugar production results in accumulation of that sugar in those leaves. With more of that accumulation, that's where you get more anthocyanins. And so you need to have a lot of sugar accumulated in these leaves to get these anthocyanins. And that's not the case for every tree species. And as a result, whenever that chlorophyll breaks down, you're going to see beautiful red leaves. So, and these anthocyanins also serve other purposes, not just with that beautiful fall color. Of course, it also is used to help protect leaves with that nutrients to kind of keep that nutrients from escaping. And it also helps to absorb things like free radicals and even provides a little bit of a frost tolerance too. So some of those trees higher in anthocyanins might be able to put up with a little bit more heavy of a frost than other tree species. So other than these pigments, what are these other factors that are affecting leaf color? It's like I mentioned earlier, and this is what we're dealing with now. Drought, unfortunately. Severe drought, water deficiency overall is going to result in not only the delay of fall leaf color, but also can cause premature leaf drop, premature leaf death, if you will. A lot of times when we get the most brilliant fall color is because we're having consistent moisture throughout the whole year, throughout the spring, summer, and fall months. Now, a mild drought, not bad. If we get kind of a wet summer into, you know, some of our kind of late summer, early fall months where we have a little bit of a mild drought, sometimes that can actually help to improve the quality, you know, but that's kind of the key here is a mild versus severe. And unfortunately, what we've experienced here in Kentucky is on the severe end. We went 30 plus days without any beneficial rainfall. And even places like in Princeton, Kentucky, they went as far as like 45 days without beneficial rainfall. So we were not in a good place. So this definitely resulted in, like I said, some premature leaf drop early on and is delaying the rest of our color now. What else affects leaf color? Temperature, of course. As we are experiencing again, the warmer the temperatures are, that can have a result on our leaves. Unfortunately, with warm fall temperatures, that can decrease the intensity of the fall colors. This is not good news. I hate to be saying like this is not great news for our fall leaf color that we're wanting. You know, we're just now finally going to be cooling off and it looks like we're going to stay cool. So we should hopefully in the next few weeks start to see some leaf color, but it just may not be quite as vibrant as what we've experienced in previous years. Other things to think about, nutrient deficiencies. So this is an example of a nutrient deficiency where you kind of have this chlorosis or yellowing that's in between those leaf veins. A lot of times that can cause a tree to color earlier and that tree leaf to drop sooner than more healthy trees around it. And the same when it comes to diseases. So something that we experienced a lot even this year, and you all may have noticed with trees in your backyard, we had a lot of fungal leaf spot diseases, lots. especially on maples. Maples just get prone to these. And so sometimes we get some of that premature leaf drop. So if you saw that, it's like, why are all these leaves on the grass? It's too early. They shouldn't be dropping this early. A lot of times things like that can result in that leaf drop. So we have seen quite a bit of that here. Something else to think about, kind of more dependent on where the tree is placed. Trees that are in low-lying or on the edge of low-lying areas, because cooler air tends to collect in those areas, they will usually display colors far sooner than a tree that's higher and more of an upland setting. So if you notice that, like you see kind of more in the valley leaf color starting versus, you know, kind of higher up, that's why. So let's talk about some different trees and what colors we might see them displayed. Now, I will say, kind of as the one picture earlier showed, sometimes trees could have all the colors, depending on how those leaves mature and eventually drop. But for the most part, these are going to be trees that kind of hold on to this color, okay? So let's get to the trees with the red or burgundy purplish foliage first. Let's talk about our oak trees, okay? So with our northern red oak, of course, where it gets that name, Quercus rubra, rubra being red, it will produce leaves that are a lovely reddish brown color. Whereas the white oak kind of produces, it's kind of hard to see with this picture, more of a darker red into brown color. And one thing I mentioned earlier is oak trees will hold on to their brown leaves even into the winter months. The concept of that, like what that is called marcescence. And with marcescence, that is used as a defense mechanism for these trees to protect their buds, to protect their tender buds, where the leaves are still kind of wrapped up around those buds. It helps prevent predation from herbivores like deer, especially deer. But also not just as a defense, you know, some scientists also think it helps to protect from environmental conditions like severe wind or frost. It helps to protect those trees. So there's a couple factors why oak trees are holding on to those leaves too. And we'll get into beeches here in a minute when we talk about kind of our kind of brown copper colors. Red maple. So of course, rubrum again is red, but red maple is a native, but we do have a ton of different cultivated varieties out there on the market. Autumn sky, October sky, like a lot of those kind of fall names. And depending on that cultivar that you purchase, it may have more of a reddish color or orangish color. So I'm kind of classifying it into both the red and orange categories. So you can see with this red maple, it has more of a lovely deep red, almost purplish tone to it. Another good example is our native flowering dogwood. And a lot of our dogwoods can actually give some fall color, but with the flowering dogwood, it gets more of that kind of deep purplish red hue to it. And then you couple that with the lovely kind of fruit that it produces, that lovely red fruit, then it creates just a really pretty fall spectacle, if you will. So we have a lot of trees with that red foliage. Another one is sourwood. So sourwood is kind of a small to medium-sized tree. It's in the blueberry family, the Ericaceae family. I like that family, Ericaceae family, just saying. But no. but that will produce more of a reddish to reddish purple color to it. So with it being a little bit of a smaller tree, if you have a smaller landscape, that might be a good plant option. On the flip side, one tree that people may not like so much is sweet gum. So sweet gum produces that reddish foliage as well. And most of us can identify sweet gum because it has those beautiful star-shaped leaves, right? Downside that we know to sweet gum though are the the gum balls, right? Those spiky, spiny gum balls that are just get all over the place. And so a lot of times we may not like them as much as a landscape plant because we're cleaning up after them. Although there are some newer cultivars out there that are a little bit more designed to be landscape plants, but I love them. I think they're beautiful trees, beautiful foliage, and I think the gumballs are kind of cool, even though they can be obnoxious. So, Staghorn sumac, a lot of our native sumacs produces really a beautiful color show, and we see this along the parkways too this time of the year. That starts off, could be yellow going to orange and then get a bright red crimson color. And you can kind of see a little bit of that color change here with the staghorn sumac. So you can see all those brilliant warm tones that are found there. Black gum. So from our sweet gum to our black gum is actually a very, very nice ornamental. That is a very nice landscape tree that you can plant. And a lot of times people are growing it for the purposes of that fall color, because that's going to give you more of that brilliant scarlet red color for fall foliage. It's kind of hard to tell. I don't feel like this picture does it justice. It's a little bit brighter on my computer, but it is such a vibrant red. Okay, let's get into trees with orange fall foliage. Of course, number one we think of is sugar maple, right? You can definitely tap sugar maple, can't you, Scott, for maple syrup? That's right. So yeah, more mature specimens of sugar maple can be tapped for maple syrup, and red maple also can be tapped for maple syrup too. With sugar maple though, you're going to get sometimes all shades. Sometimes you'll get more red and yellow, but for the most part, it will kind of keep to a more orangey tone in your landscape. Again, as I mentioned, with the red maple, depending on the cultivar you have, may be more red or orange. This one's called Autumn Flame, so it kind of has more of that orange coloration to it. Sassafras, this is a wonderful little native tree, and I find it to be like the best, especially whenever you're teaching kids about what trees to identify, because it has such interesting, fall leaf, such interesting leaf shapes, where it has kind of more of the singular kind of oval shape to the mitten shape, yes, and then the three lobes. So it's got all those different leaf shapes. And you can maybe vaguely notice that here in the picture. But with sassafras, that's going to turn more orange, but it can have some red and yellow colors. And I've seen some really nice sassafras that gets into a deep red color too. Now, one thing I'll mention, because I know some of you that have been in multiple of my classes, you'll know that something we're kind of monitoring with sassafras is it's very susceptible to this new disease called laurel wilt disease, where unfortunately it will cause complete death of that tree. And so we are monitoring sassafras trees in our region for that laurel wilt disease. Primarily not really seeing much of this in Hopkins County. It's kind of more further to our south. We're seeing cases in Christian County right now, but that is something like our forestry professionals are monitoring, because it is having an impact and may potentially reduce our sassafras populations, unfortunately. So if you all have sassafras and just randomly you see it die, it just seems like it's a sudden death almost, then feel free to give me a call and let me go out there and look at the tree. So then I can see and diagnose it if I think it's laurel wilt, because that is something we're watching very closely. Because we don't, it's like other trees, you know, it's like, you know, our American chestnuts and things like that. We don't want things to fall victim to another blight or another disease or another pest or anything like that. So we're just kind of quickly monitoring those situations. Let's talk about trees with fall foliage, yellow fall foliage. One that I love is tulip poplar. And actually, on the free table back there, there is some tulip poplar tree seedlings. They look a little sad, but I think they could make it if you plant them soon. Tulip poplar is one of our taller native trees, and you can recognize it based on kind of the four lobes that it produces. And then in the spring into summer, it produces these vibrant, colorful flowers. And I just love it when the flower petals start to fall and you just see them kind of on the ground. It's just really pretty and aesthetic to just kind of walk through like these petals, kind of like, I don't know, it kind of reminds me like if you're at a wedding and you have the flower girl putting petals everywhere. Sometimes like the trails will be lined with the petals of the tulip poplar. So it's very pretty. And of course, it produces outstanding yellow fall color. Another one, shagbark hickory, Scott. Well, that was just perfect that you brought that in today. Let me tell you, because a lot of times we don't really think of a lot of our nut trees as having a lot of fall color, but shagbark especially gets some really lovely yellow to kind of copperish tone to the foliage. So, and as we discovered today, the bark creates a really nice kind of maple syrup alternative. So brilliant. Yes. Yes. You can really tell it's a shagbark by the bark just from shaggy bark, right? It looks just like it. So that gives you kind of an idea there.
One thing says shagbark are one of the only trees that continues to grow bark and it falls off
Mm-hmm.
and continues to reproduce itself. I mean, if you want to find bark, you can actually get on the ground underneath. When you take some of it off, it does as the tree grows instead of the bark, it just drops the bark and grows another.
Yeah, shagbark's definitely not to like, I mean, shellbark hickory is very nice too, but shagbark, there's just something to it. It's just a really fun tree. So, a non-native, we talked about pretty much all native trees, but one that I kind of wanted to showcase is ginkgo. Of course, this originates from Asia, but it makes a really nice landscape tree here. We've got several planted. There's several planted even over by the hospital right now. And what I love about ginkgo is the tree has a really nice shape. It's more of this kind of triangular pyramidal shape. And the leaves are of that brilliant fan shape, kind of iconic, if you will. But what's lovely is in the fall, this turns like a golden yellow color, golden yellow. And when the leaves all drop, you're like sitting in a blanket of yellow. And it's like beautiful, like picture perfect, you know? Yes, they do. It's like, it's literally like a puddle of just yellow that hits the floor. I had, if anyone ever goes to Bernheim Arboretum, they have a beautiful old ginkgo tree there. And if you hit it just right in the fall, it creates kind of that lovely, lovely fall blanket, yellow fall blanket right underneath it. I was able to see that happen a couple years ago. It's really, really pretty. Let's move on to trees with bronze fall color. So bronze is almost like a nice way of me saying it's more brown, but it's still very pretty, okay? We look at all the colors and we can still very much appreciate them, right? So American Beach, this kind of gets more of a brownish copper tone to it. As I had mentioned with the oaks, it also will hold on to its leaves when it's young. Older trees, not so much, but while the beech is young, more the juvenile, those leaves will turn brown and still hang on the tree into the winter months. And again, they think it's used to protect browsing deer from eating at those buds. So again, it might serve other purposes like protection from extreme weather, things like that, but they kind of think it's mostly for control over wildlife. So let's talk about some of our other oaks, because a lot of times we associate most oaks with kind of browning foliage. Our pin oak, which for many, many years was a very popular shade tree. And I know we've got a ton of pin oaks planted all over this county. A lot of people like them because they're really nice shade tree. They're usually fast growing, although we have had some issues with it with some kind of disease or just, branches falling off and just kind of creating a little bit of a mess, if you will. But for the most part, like we see a lot of pin oaks in our landscape. And so that will create kind of more of this orange to bronze color. Another oak that I want to highlight, and I know we've got plenty here at Moore Park, so is our bur oaks. And the reason I especially love bur oaks is they have not only, I mean, the leaves are fine, but the acorns are so fun. They produce such large acorns and they're kind of fringed where they almost resemble that of like a chestnut. So that's kind of how you distinguish them from other oak trees. But it's just so fun to collect the acorns because they're just massive acorns. Scott, didn't you bring some in not long ago? That's what I thought. Yeah. Yes. They're just so fun to like see and almost like collect, if you will. I don't know. I love those acorns.
But there's not a lot, everybody said what they want, there's not a lot of them in this area.
Not as much, no. Not as much, unfortunately. But with the bur oak, you do see a little bit of that fall color, kind of more of that brownish to copper to it. All right. So let's kind of finish up here and let's talk about shedding leaves, or why are trees shedding leaves? Okay, so with the exception of the beeches and the oaks that we talked about, why do these leaves eventually fall off the trees when the plants go dormant? There's a number of reasons for that. Pretty much what you can imagine is for winter preparation, okay? And so, especially in areas where we could experience snow or ice accumulation, of course, if you have the leaves fall off the trees, then that creates less weight, less pressure. So then those branches are less likely to break off, okay? I know a lot of us know this all too well from our ice storm in 2009 about the powers of Mother Nature. And so if you can imagine, if a lot of those trees still had leaves on them, in addition to the however much ice we had, it was already devastating, but I can't imagine it even worse than that, honestly. So that's one of the reasons. It helps lighten the load, if you will, for any winter accumulation. Finally, too, fallen leaves provide fertile soil, right? Of course, we know this when we're in our forests, in our wooded areas, and our leaves are slowly decomposing under the canopy a lot of times that will create more rich humus-like organic matter that's important for our trees and other shrubs, other plants in the understory to take up. Yes. Essential for those roots to pick up those nutrients. And that's one thing I'll kind of mention here. Like, even though we're not really talking about this, but I know I get a lot of questions with fall cleanup, right? Like, do we rake up our leaves and remove our leaves? Well, if you're somebody where you're really mindful of the environment, of the ecosystems and the interactions that are occurring, honestly, you'll want to leave the leaves alone if you can, and not even like mowing over them. If you can kind of leave them be, a lot of times those leaves will house many overwintering insects. And that's just so crucial. Beneficial insects. A lot of our bees overwinter in our leaves. And so if you can kind of leave the leaves on the ground undisturbed, then that's going to be best. That's going to be important for our insects to recover and come back and fulfill their life cycle the next year. So that's something that I'll mention. And honestly, a lot of people get concerned with too many leaves being on their yard. It's really not going to be that bad on your lawn. It's really not. And so if you have an area where you can just leave them alone, just leave them alone. Okay. So when it comes down to that. To end here, I mentioned the marcescence. That's the term with the oaks and with the beeches about holding on to those dead leaves. So that will actually conclude the presentation. So let me stop recording.